Everyone, my name is Hayden Mills and I will be giving my comparison project on electroreception in sharks. So first I'm going to define what electroreception is. It is the capacity to detect external underwater electric fields with specialized receptors, and it is a phylogenetically widespread sensory modality in fishes and amphibians. So sharks use their snouts to detect this electroreception and the weak fields in the water, the weak electric fields. The thing that is in their snout that helps them detect these fields, it is called the ampullae of Lorenzini. Lorenzini is just the guy who discovered electroreception in 1678. There are two types of electroreception that I found, and one of them is called passive mode and the other is called active mode of electroreception. The active mode, I did not find as much research indicating that it's not used as much in sharks and aquatic animals, so I decided to kind of base my research off of the passive mode. And the passive mode is the detection of naturally occurring low frequency electric fields. So what's interesting about this is like these action potentials that are sent up through the nervous system and into the brain kind of affect the whole shark's body. So unlike humans where we just use our nose to smell, our eyes to see, and things like that, electroreception kind of affects the whole body. And when they're taking in things from their environment, that's when it really plays a large role. So I thought that was interesting to mention. So moving on to the physiology of the sensory organ, this would be the ampullae of Lorenzini. Here I kind of have lined up how these electric fields travel through the shark's snout into the canals and then to the brain, and how that information is analyzed. So to start off, the sharks obviously sense that a weak electric field in their environment from other sea animals, and that's when they use the ampullae. So in these fields, the electricity is generated in canals that extend from the skin to the ampullae. So you can kind of see in this photo here where those canals are located. I talk a little bit later about how the certain ways the canals are oriented depends on what information they analyze, so that's super interesting. After that, single layer sensing cells line the ampullae, and these cells respond to the electrical charge. And then from this response, this is when it activates nearby nerves and notifies the brain of notifies the brain of the presence of another animal. So the reason these sharks use this sense is to sense where other animals are coming from, hunting, and all that stuff, which I'll talk about in this slide. So how do sharks use this sixth sense? Instead of just like using their sight, hearing, taste, and things like that, they use their sense to see if there are other animals near them in the environment or in the water, especially when it's dark on that ocean floor. They kind of need something to depend on instead of their sight, because they obviously can't see very well when it's dark. They can sense other animals maybe sneaking up on them. They can detect non-electrogenic and electrogenic prey animals. So I talk a lot about how they sense weak electricity from other animals, but they can really do it from both. It's just more common for them to sense the weak fields. So the effects can be separated by a combination of behavior, which is how they swim, which they swim horizontally on that ocean floor, and then also peripheral anatomy, which is the way the canals in their snout are oriented. So in my next slide, I talk about how vertically oriented canals do something, and then also horizontally oriented canals. And then they obviously use it to attack other animals, and when they do that, they're really focusing on electroreception so they can make a successful bite. Like I said, instead of focusing on their eyesight, because sometimes that is not as reliable as just focusing on electroreception. So it's almost like with humans, like if we were to kind of close our eyes, close our ears, and like close our nose to try something new or try a new food, like you know how people always close their eyes to try a new food, so they can really focus on the taste of that. It's kind of like sharks with this. So that's kind of a comparison that we have with them. So the different fields of reception that these sharks use, there's kind of a lot of them, like I said, because they use their whole body. So sharks sense weak fields from other animals, like I've been saying. Marine fish and invertebrates produce bioelectric fields, which is kind of a different type of field, which these elasmobranchi can detect from tens of centimeters away. So the different kinds of electric fields they can sense from just so far away, it's crazy. And elasmobranchi are the subclass for cartilaginous fish, which include modern sharks, just for reference. So like I was saying in the last slide, the way that the canals are oriented is super important for what jobs they do. So electroreceptor organs with vertically oriented canals will detect changes in motion-induced voltages, while those with horizontally oriented canals will detect changes in orientation with respect to the environmental electric field. So when you have a canal that is vertically oriented, so up and down, that is their job is to detect the motion in the environment so the sharks can take that information, have them be able to react to things. And then the other canals that are oriented horizontally, so side to side, those detect orientation. So depending on what the environment the shark is in, that is how they react. That is how they will react. So I thought that was kind of interesting because it also is kind of like humans, I guess, where we react to different things in our environment as well. Also, one thing that was found through just kind of like research over electroreception over the last few decades is that the ampullae responds to touch and temperature change as well. So like this is kind of the reason why these sharks really focus on this sense, is because it does so much and they can rely on it because it really helps them survive, honestly. So I thought it was important to include that it responds to temperature change and touch. And here in this video, I have just like a representation of how this information goes through these canals. So obviously it starts here in the skin, it goes through the pore, and then these signals go through these canals depending on if they're horizontally or vertically placed, and then through the ampulla, through the nerves, and then into the brain. So kind of just like humans with how our nerves fire and give us information. So moving on to humans and our senses. Um, Humans, we do not have anything like electroreception, which is what makes sharks so unique. But what we do is we perceive certain sound waves through our stereocilia in our ears, whereas sharks have the ability to detect that stimulus at a much higher level through electroreception. So they kind of have that advantage on us, which I guess makes sense. But here I have two examples from class where we learned about vision and then vision, hearing, and just like motion perception. So one of the vocab words I mentioned again here is ILDs, and that is the difference between sound intensity for two ears. So the reason I included these is because we use motion detection, hearing, and vision to understand things in our environment, just as how sharks do with electroreception. So obviously, depending on where things are located, that's how we know what is firing, and then as well with like motion detection, depending on what we see first and how that travels through our perceptive field, that's kind of how we react. So yeah, so it helps us know where things are located, just like how sharks use electroreception. So as I mentioned before, sharks are actually are not the only aquatic animals that have electroreception that utilize it to survive. There are other aquatic animals as well. So some of them are common rays and skates, sawfish, and electric rays. There are actually a lot more, but these are just three examples that I choose. So common rays and skates, these types of fish, they are the ones that kind of glide on the bottom of the ocean, and they use reception to feed. So like I said earlier, since it's so dark down there, that's how they use that to their advantage. Sawfish, as you can see in the upper right, that photo, they use those super long snouts with those pores and then the ampullae within them to detect electrosensitive, or to detect prey under the ocean floor. So that kind of piece of their body is super cool. And then as well with electric rays, as it says in the name, they use their organs to electrically kill prey. So on my last slide here, I thought it was kind of important to include some intriguing insights because these kind of provide real-world examples about how these sharks use this sense. So first I have here is that 1/1,000,000th of a volt across a centimeter of seawater can be distinguished by a shark. So this is compared to like a 1.5 volt AA battery that is placed in the Long Island Sound, and then the other one is placed in in Jacksonville, Florida. And I researched this, and that is actually 887 miles away from each other, which is insane. So there's another thing that is being created by humans that are like magnets, and a lot of surfers have kind of been using these, or anyone that swims in shark populated waters. They can wear these magnets around their ankles, and it's used to deter sharks, and it kind of zaps the sensitivity of electroreception. So it's almost just like an overload of electricity that the sharks just veer away from because it just becomes too much. And then my last fact here is that sharks were actually not the first fish to possess electroreceptors. It is found that the ancient species chimeras were actually the first to be discovered to have electroreception before sharks did. So that's my presentation on my comparison theory and electroreception sharks. Thank you.